Hello, my beautiful empresses. Welcome back to Embody Your Empress. We have another fabulous guest with us today, Leonie Laukkanen. Welcome. I love your crown.
I know, isn't it just the best? I bought it for my daughter. I think she's almost 10, so it's probably maybe her eighth or ninth birthday, but it's super pretty. Her name is Luna, so it has like a moon and it has all the
Oh.
crystals, and I totally stole it from her bedroom, so don't tell her.
Ah! Well, if she watches this or listens,
No,
she
she won't. She
find
won't.
out.
I
She
did
won't.
say, "Can I borrow your crown?" She was like, "Yeah, Mum, of course you can." So yeah, we love wearing our crowns.
I love what we do as mums as well. Like we buy something just so we know we're going to borrow it at some stage.
Yeah, she's actually, I mean, she's almost 10, but she wears all my clothes. It's crazy. It's like, yeah, they grow super quick. And before you know it, like we love op shopping and we cleaned up at the op shop on Saturday. Like
Oh
we
my
got
God.
so much treasure. So yeah, I love that we can hang out and do girly stuff. And we had sushi for lunch and we just had a beautiful, day together. So it's nice. I love having a daughter. I've got two boys as well, but I love having a daughter so we can go shopping and, do nice
That
things.
is the perfect self-care weekend, in my opinion. Like off
Yes,
shopping, sushi, bonding with the kids. How can you go
yes,
wrong? Oh my
yeah, yeah,
gosh. Leonie, you are a mental wellness coach and a corporate wellness facilitator. And when I saw you put out there, you wanted to talk neurodivergency. And just in case you don't know at home, while we're recording this is actually neurodivergency week. Like, how aligned is that? I just knew that we had to sit down and have a chat and just shed some light, open the conversation about neurodivergency, what it means, who's affected, how we can support our children. And
yeah.
also, I would love to talk about many women in my own age bracket are now finding that they are also in the neurodivergent world and they've lived a whole life without knowing this. So
Yeah.
I would love to come back to that a bit later on. But do you want to tell us a little bit about you, your family, what
Yeah.
you do in the world?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned I've got a beautiful daughter who's almost 10. I have a 6-year-old little bundle of energy, and I have a 16-year-old. So I've kind of got like all the ages. So if you're having issues with your kids, I'm like, I've got all the ages covered, 6, almost 10, and 16. So look, I'm really passionate about creating awareness around neurodiversity. And because it is Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is, that's wonderful. And in corporate, I do a lot of corporate wellness. It's an initiative to really be more open around it and share more awareness around it. So I thought, I would actually start to create more content this week. And the first post I shared was actually, what does it actually mean? Because I think people get really confused. So basically, what it means is if you identify as being neurodivergent, that means you may identify with having symptoms of ADHD or autism or OCD or PDA. I mean, there's so many labels. So if you identify as being neurotypical, then you don't have those symptoms, right? So you actually can't identify as being neurodiverse because that is actually for a group of people. So a singular person would say, I'm neurodivergent, right? A single person would say, I'm neurotypical, but a group of neurotypical and neurodivergent people would be neurodiverse, right? Because what
Okay.
that means is that the brain is wired differently. So a neurotypical person has one way of thinking and being, and a
Mhm.
neurodivergent person has another way of thinking and being. So I have a neurodiverse family because my husband identifies as being neurotypical, and the poor guy has to live with me and all my perimenopause and ADHD glory, and my children, who are two of them are diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and I'm sure my little one will follow. So we are neurodiverse because we are both neurotypical and both neurodivergent. So I think people get confused around what does neurodiversity mean.
Mhm.
And so neurodiversity simply means we are wired in different ways and we live in a neurodiverse world. We're not a neurotypical world because people are wired differently now. And there's so much awareness around that. So I used to say, I'm a neurodiverse woman, and that's not actually correct. I'm a neurodivergent woman. So I think that's the first thing I want to clarify because there's a lot of miscommunication and a lot of people are kind of like, I don't really know what it even is. Like it's just a
Mhm.
thing that people talk about. And it can take a long time to be diagnosed. And so there is a huge increase in children being diagnosed now. You know, there's like 1 in 4 children will have some kind of label.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to diagnose autism in girls because girls mask their symptoms. So it's very hard to diagnose. It's much more obvious in boys, for example, because their behavior is a lot more external, whereas girls will be a lot more internal. So it is a big journey that you go on. And typically what I've noticed is a child will be diagnosed and then a parent will kind of have this big awakening and go, I just thought that that was my normal life, right? These sort of idiosyncratic behaviors. And then they often go down a journey of identifying as being neurodivergent. So that's been my path. And that's definitely been many of the neurodivergent and neurodiverse families that I help. That's been their journey as well. So I think that's what we wanted to talk about today. And so I wanted to just clarify what that means, because there is misconception around that.
What a great place to start, because words are just thrown around and often there is not the conversation or the education behind them. And so you're sort of like guessing where you are. You don't want to offend anyone. You're trying to use the correct terminology, but don't actually go there and get that education. So that is a fantastic place to start. Can I ask, is there any differences in how a child and how an adult is diagnosed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think there is a difference in terms of the diagnostic criteria. So a diagnostic criteria would be, a specific set of symptoms that may present to an individual. So I haven't been diagnosed as an adult. I don't need a diagnosis. Like, I'm fully aware of my quirkiness or my spiciness or whatever you want to say. But I would assume it would be a very similar process. The only difference would be a pediatrician would diagnose a child and a psychiatrist would diagnose an adult. In terms of the diagnostic criteria, I'm assuming they would be using the DSM-5, which is the same. That's the diagnostic criteria. Like, you have to meet a certain amount of symptoms to have a diagnosis. And of course, another myth or something I like to talk about is it is a spectrum. It is a huge spectrum. So if you've got a young child who's acting out in class, can't sit still, zoning out constantly in sort of a dream world, that might appear that they've got ADHD or ADD, which is there's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then there's attention deficit disorder without the hyperactivity. So there's just all these different variations. But that could also be that the child is under a lot of stress and has a lot of trauma. And the child is actually presenting as ADHD, but actually their parents are going through a divorce, or, they've got a lot of stress in their life, so they zone out to cope, or they have behavior that, is aggressive. And so it's so multi-layered and so multifaceted. And there's big debates around, is ADHD genetic? Is autism genetic? Many researchers will say absolutely. I mean, I've got 2 kids with different dads and they have the same diagnosis. So clearly there's a biological connection. But then other experts like Dr. Gabor Mate will say, actually, the rise in diagnosis is because of parental stress and trauma.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that it's very controversial. So it can be really hard to get a diagnosis because symptoms can present in different ways. And so when my son was 9 and he was, being quite, well, he was really struggling. And we always knew, as a mother, I think you have intuition around these things. We always knew that he was probably not the same as a neurotypical child. And when he got diagnosed with ADHD, we were kind of like, okay, that makes sense, right? Like, we can see those behaviors and what's happening. But then he got diagnosed when he was 11 with autism. And I guess we weren't really expecting that, because that's another whole kind of diagnostic criteria. And that's really hard to diagnose because it's not as obvious as ADHD symptoms. And then with my daughter, she was 8 and she got diagnosed with autism and ADHD at the same time with the same pediatrician. And again, we were really surprised she had autism, because again, the ADHD symptoms were quite obvious: distracted, in dream world, takes, ages to get ready in the morning, loves to spend 20 minutes doing her hair. And we're like, you should be dressed by now, that kind of thing, just like by distraction. But But at school, she's like the perfect child, teacher's pet, enthusiastic, no behavioral issues whatsoever, because all day she just masks. And then we see that overwhelm and that anxiety, high levels of social anxiety at home. Whereas with my son, he couldn't really hold it together at school or at home. It was much more obvious. So this is the thing, boys and girls present really differently. And until you go down that diagnostic criteria, it can be really overwhelming, because you're like, even when you get a diagnosis, for some people, that's a massive relief. And they're like, oh, it makes so much sense now. But for other people, it's also really overwhelming. If what they read about ADHD or autism, or like there's something called PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. Like there's all these labels. And, you know, you go onto Google and it's like worst case scenario. So it can be really overwhelming for parents. So yeah, it's a big journey, and it's a lifelong journey. You know, you don't grow out of autism. But interestingly, ADHD symptoms, when managed, can regress. So a 6-year-old, or, you know, a young child with ADHD, like I've seen it in my 16-year-old. Like when he was young, it was very obvious. Now he's 16, he's really thriving, right? He doesn't have hyperactive outbursts anymore. He manages his emotions. He's very quirky, and he loves being quirky. And he kind of owns his kind of weirdness now, you know, but you can actually, they can regress as you become an adult, the symptoms, if they're managed really well.
Okay, yeah. And I guess once you become an adult, like there are so many more challenges we face in general. So could some of those trigger off what progress had been made? And then it would be up to the individual to make that progression again.
Yeah, look, you ultimately go, like, if you want to get a diagnosis, you're in a crisis. You know, if you're coping and you're managing, you can just go, there's so much information online, you can self-diagnose, right? And say, okay, I identify with this, and I'm going to, you know, come up with some management strategies. Ultimately, if you're going to a psychiatrist or a pediatrician, you're in crisis and you need intervention. And what they will do is prescribe medication ultimately. As a solution. 90% of the time they'll say you need medication, which I do and don't agree with to a certain extent, but that's just my personal view on that. So I don't need to be diagnosed because my children have confirmed it. But what happened to me was perimenopause, and then I could not manage my ADHD symptoms anymore. And I had to like radically change my lifestyle so that I could manage my overwhelm and my stress and my anxiety and my brain fog and my restlessness and my insomnia. Like it was full on. Like I had an MRI scan on my brain because I actually thought I was losing my mind. Like I was just a complete mess.
Wow.
Yeah. And me not understanding that actually it was my unmanaged ADHD, and that just the sheer overwhelm of having 3 neurodivergent children, it's just so much. So yeah, mass intervention was needed. And like I'm going great now, you know, I'm sharing about this, which is something I'm really passionate about as well. So yeah, it's a big journey. And if anyone needs support, please reach out, because I've been on this path for a long time. And now I'm really passionate about sharing about, you know, being neurodivergent, or being in a, you know, having a neurodiverse family. Like I'm really passionate about it, because it's a very overwhelming journey, but there is so much support out there. And I you know, the more people I meet who are kind of like me and on that path, like, you know, we all have big, beautiful hearts. We all have lots of compassion, lots of empathy. We're really intuitive. We're really creative. But there's some amazing positives that come with it. But if you don't manage it, it's very overwhelming.
Hearing you speak, I can just imagine so many people in the same scenario as you. What would your advice, what would your first step be for someone who has just found out their child is neurodivergent? They're stepping into that world of, like you said, it can be great or it could be overwhelming because there's so much to wrap your head around. What would the very first thing be for those parents?
Look, knowledge is power, right? Like I went down this massive rabbit hole and just read everything I could about ADHD or, you know, autism, or, you know, what I was told that the diagnosis was. So I think knowledge is power, because you start to realize, well, hang on, it is a spectrum. And it's not black and white. It's kind of ironic because an autistic brain does see the world in a very literal way. It's very black and white for them, but there is, like, I love neuroscience, and I learned all about the brain. I went back to uni last year to study a postgrad on mental health and neuroscience, and a big part of that was understanding ADHD and autism and all the mental health issues that can come as a result. I mean, sadly, neurodivergent individuals are 4 times more likely to have mental health issues. And so, there needs to be a lot of intervention, and life expectancy is so much less for someone with autism. And it's not necessarily the diagnosis, it's health issues, or it's accidents, or it's things that it's kind of things like drowning is like the number one way a child with autism can die, things like that you don't think about. So you go down a rabbit hole, and some of it's going to be amazing and some of it's going to be really confronting. And so I think you need to educate yourself, like really educate yourself. You need to be an advocate for your child. Like, I am just constantly, in the classroom, in the school, getting the intervention. I got my children NDIS, but I had to fight for 6 months. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't give up. And I was like, my child needs therapy. My child needs this. And we have a great psychologist and an OT. And you've just got to really fight for them. But that can be really hard if you are also neurodivergent, because I have a thing where I really can't fill out forms. Like, it completely overwhelms my brain. I just can't do it. So you have to fill out 8 billion forms for NDIS. And it's the same shit that you have to write over and over again. Like, I went to my GP 5 times. Like, it's a really, like, big thing. And so that would just put there's a lot of people that just be like, that is too, I can't do that. Right. And then they made all these changes, and now, we lost all our supports. It's a big world, and it's a lot to manage.
So I think just touching on the subject for a moment, like, the media have put out these clickbait stories about NDIS, about people who need the support, and there's a lot of clickbait and false information out there. And yet when you talk to people who are going through the process, who get rejected from the process, trying to fund these therapies out of pocket, and they need it, and like you say, you're filling out the same thing 100 times, you're having all these meetings with different professionals, with the people that make decisions, and they're not set up in a way that are conducive for that person who is struggling, who needs help, who is being challenged. I think that is a massive downfall in, like, our society at the moment. Like, and for those people out there who are listening or watching that haven't been in contact with this situation, please have so much more empathy for anyone who is out there. Don't believe the clickbait stories. Like, don't believe them. They are there just to gain some media traction. But there are so many people out there who are challenged and who are losing out. Like you say, you're losing support. You're losing therapy.
I mean, NDIS had to make changes because people were really abusing the system. And that's what happens. People were funding things that are not allowed to be funded. And that's why NDIS had to make those changes. But then as a result, so many people have now lost their support or lost their funding. And, it's a really, like, I'm really grateful that we have it in Australia. Like, I'm from the UK, there's zero support there. There's many countries all over the world that don't have any support. I was interviewed by a lady in Norway the other day, and she's like, we get nothing. Like, we get nothing, right? So I am so grateful we have NDIS, as a support in Australia, but that doesn't mean it's an easy process. I live in fear. I mean, I don't live in fear, but I do worry that they would take my funding away. It's like, if you don't use it, they take it away, and then you're trying to desperately use it. But then it takes months to find the right support because the child doesn't always get on with everyone. And it's just a whole world, and it can be a lot. So my advice is, get yourself educated, try to get the support you can. Like, my kids are at an independent school, and they've just been phenomenal. They've been amazing. And, my daughter loves, she really shines on stage. And so she's really involved in the school production this year. She's got a lead role, and I'm going to be doing all the costume for it. Because I love that. I love it. It's so creative. It's like Greek gods and goddesses with, like, a modern twist. So in my head, I'm like, Zeus is going to have spiky hair and, tattoos. But I was like, that for me, it's like, that's the glue that's holding us together at school right now, right? Because she's a star on stage, and then I'm there to support her throughout that. So I think if you can get involved with your child's school, that's great. You know, show them that you want to help them and support them. Because all my daughter's issues are friendship related. Like that's her biggest struggle, is social anxiety and not knowing how to respond. And 10-year-old girls are just toxic. It's just a lot, right? Some of the things they say to each other, it's just horrible. So that's just another whole world as well. So I think, you know, be an advocate, get involved with what your child is doing, find those common interests. And, you know, we're really open in our house as well. You know, we talk about, yeah, all the things. We don't shy away from sex, or, you know, we're very open, right? And in fact, part of being neurodivergent is that you don't have a filter. So
I was just going to say, right, that's more helpful, right? Because they, like, you look for facts. Neurodivergent people look for facts. So just being open and honest about things without, you know, talking around it and just being really direct would be more helpful for them, right?
Yeah, there's no bullshit. So it's like the bullshit radar disappears, and it's kind of like this is how it is. And some people find that really offensive. But it's hard for neurodivergent people to live in a world where people don't talk about their feelings really openly. It's just really confusing. It's like you're saying one thing, but you mean another thing, which is what people do all the time. They lie all the time.
Yeah, all day long.
Yeah, all day long. And it's like, why would you do that?
Yeah, it's our society conditioning, right? What a beautiful way to strip it back. How does your husband handle that side of things? Like, is he very open about talking directly, or does he find it a little bit confronting?
Look, he's really interesting because he's from Finland, so he's Finnish, and they actually they're a very interesting culture. They don't do small talk. They are very like to the point, and you know, very sufficient, and like the women are really stoic. And we're very involved with the Finnish community here in Brisbane. Like my husband's a teacher, I run the cafe. Again, you know, they're a great community, and I really enjoy hanging out with them because again, no bullshit, right? And they just say it how it is, and then I really enjoy them. But he like we've been together for 10 years, and he just finds me hilarious, which I hope he always does. But I'm actually interviewing a friend of mine because I'm doing interviews a week for Neurodivergent Celebration Week. We both have ADHD, and the way we converse, it is just like all over the place. And we just laugh about our poor husbands that just stand there. Like I have an entire conversation with myself in the kitchen, and then he'll be like, was I even involved in that? I'm like, yeah, babe, it's fine. And I figured out that I'm a verbal processor. So what that means is I need to talk to process my thoughts and feelings and emotions. He's like, but you just had this whole conversation with yourself. I was like, yeah, but I was talking to you.
And you've reached the outcome at the end of it because you processed it all right. So done.
Thanks.
I love that.
Yeah, so it's like but he's also very loving and very accepting, and he also definitely has ADHD traits, right? Like we kind of laugh about it, but you know, he and we both had mental health journeys as well. So just because you're neurotypical doesn't mean you're just going to have this amazing life without any struggle, right? Like it's just creating awareness. And so yeah, he is amazing, and he's very quirky. So obviously we are just a quirky, like my kids are we're just always naked. It's just a thing. It's like, I'm trying to just get them to put clothes on, you know? Like it's just
one with the world.
Yeah.
Is there, you just touched on like the mental health journey as well. Is there any top tips you would give a family? Obviously, if you've got neurodivergent children,
you
need to prioritize your mental health, like, because you are that foundation, you are that advocate. Is there any top tips you would give our parents out there?
Definitely. So my philosophy on parenting and, you know, looking after your kids is that your kids are just not your whole world. And if you do that, if you put your child in the center of your universe, you're not self-caring, right? You're not looking after your partner, your marriage. And I went through a divorce. Yeah, I went through a divorce 15 years ago with my son, my eldest. And I was a single mom for about 3 years. And that was really challenging. And I didn't know my son was neurodivergent at the time. And, you know, his behavior was quite extreme. And so my husband and I are remarried, and we have this philosophy that he's also divorced, that we actually prioritize ourselves first, right? So he goes bike riding and running, and he's going to Japan this year and doing a big adventure race. And I do my retreats and I do all my spiritual goddess stuff. And we always fully support each other in whatever we want to do, right? And then we prioritize each other. Date nights, time together, you know, even if it's just watching Mavs on the couch, no judgment, right? Whatever. Then we make sure the kids are okay, right? Because if you look at it from that lens, like I put all my energy into my child, went through a divorce, I was like, okay, that's not the right way to go about it. My kids are still completely loved and have everything they need, and we're role modeling to them that our well-being and our mental health comes first, right? It's the whole oxygen mask analogy. We've all heard it a billion times, but we don't do it. And I speak to people, I'm always messaging people, and they're like, oh, my kids come first. I'm like, no, they don't. You come first. If you don't have good energy, if you don't have good sleep, right? If you're not feeling good, you are just going to be like, I've been in overwhelm and burnout many times. And then as a result, I've had health issues. And it's like, we can't care for others if we don't care for ourselves. So number one, you're the lighthouse. You have to look after yourself. And, you know, you may be a single parent and you may not have a partner to rely on. And that can be very hard, especially if you're dealing with neurodivergent children. That is really hard. So when I was a single mom, I just had a whole single mom crew, right? And we just all hung out and we helped each other, right? And so you build your tribe, you find your network. But one thing I've done is last July, I was actually really in crisis with perimenopause. I had this crazy insomnia, brain fog, anxiety, the whole shebang, and my kids were struggling, and it was not a good time for us. And this company arrived in Australia called the Mental Wellness Company. And, you know, I was doing my postgrad in mental health, and I thought, this is amazing. I'm gonna align myself with this company. And so I've been with this company now since July, and it's been phenomenal. So we all take this natural supplement, and it's 3 products, and it's gut health and brain health, and it lowers cortisol, it lowers stress in the body, and it increases dopamine and serotonin. So if you're neurodivergent, you seek dopamine like lollies, right? You are constantly seeking dopamine. ADHD meds is actually synthetic dopamine, right? So this is a natural product, lowers stress, increases good happy hormones. So my 9-year-old's was medicated since he was 9. He's off his meds. My daughter was also medicated for sleep, off her meds. My iron levels were chronically low from burnout. You know, ADHD has also contributed to very low iron. They've doubled. Like I could go on for hours about the benefits, but this product, you know, my sleep's been restored, my energy's been restored. So I now share this product because it has fundamentally changed the vibration of my house. My kids are like, it's amazing. So I've now gone on this big trajectory where I'm now really involved with this company, and I'm building this. I've got a global team. I've got customers and clients all over the world, and they are neurodiverse and neurodivergent families who I'm supporting with this product. So I'm so grateful I'm on this path, right? Like I wouldn't be doing any of this if I didn't have neurodivergent children. So that's been my journey. And if anyone is interested in that, please reach out. I'm happy to share links and information. But I'm not against medication. It's absolutely necessary in certain situations, but long term, it is really detrimental for the body. For years, I've tried all the holistic things. So that has been my number one. Look after your gut health. It's where all your serotonin is made, you know, your dopamine, or you feel good. Like if you've got good gut health, you will, you know, skin issues. So it solves so many issues. And then you want to look after brain health. That's really important. Brain health is really important. And so it's the gut-brain axis connection. So there's a billion different benefits, but I just wanted to share that because I'm really passionate about supporting other families, because like we've been in crisis many times, and it's an awful place to be, and you don't know what to do, you know, so you medicate your kids.
That's right. You get to that point where you just don't know what other alternatives are there. And like you say, you could go down a million different remedies, natural ways, holistic ways. But if something has such an amazing power, I would love to link that in the show notes.
Thank you.
That'd be great.
Thank you. It's
oh my gosh.
amazing.
Yes. And just about putting yourself first and your partner first. I love that so much, like so passionately. That really aligns with what I talk to clients about, because when they hit me with no, my children have to come first, I'm like, and then if your child grows up and does exactly what you do, you are the role model for that. And we don't want that for our daughters, for our sons. We want healthy adults out there. And
kids have no resilience, right? They have no resilience. Like if you think about, like my son's 16 and he's a gamer, right? He doesn't go out partying. And I took him to see Aurora because he loves Aurora for his birthday at Fortitude Valley, which is a big, beautiful music hall in Brisbane. And we had to catch the train home at 11:30. And Fortitude Valley, it's like everyone's just drunk, falling over. He was just like, oh my God, like this is like being in a circus. I'm like, when I was 16, that's what I was doing. I was partying and I was going to all these crazy places. And I'm like, this is the thing with our teenagers. They're not going out and doing all this crazy stuff that we did as kids, which I'm glad in a way, right? But they've got no resilience. They're not problem solving. They're not getting themselves into mischief. They don't have this, like peer support is so important when you're a teenager. And so my son's friendships are all online. And I'm kind of like, why aren't you just hanging out, going to the cinema? And he's just not interested.
really,
And it's just like, so what happens is they become adults, but they actually can't function.
that's massive. That is massive. Oh, interesting.
It's huge, isn't it? So I'm
Yeah.
like, go and do something you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. In the most loving way, right?
Just don't take drugs. No drugs or alcohol.
No, you get yourself into trouble, you can get yourself out of trouble.
Totally.
That's a really good point. Yes. At least he knows, like, it sounds like you guys have such an open, beautiful communication style in your household that if he does get into a situation where he's unsure of that, he can always turn to you.
Yeah, I read this once and it really just rang home to me that if your children will not tell you the little things now, they won't ever tell you the big things.
Yes.
And I've always remembered that because I'm like, I want my kids to ring me if they're in trouble or, if they need support. I don't want them to be like too scared, I'm like, oh, I can't call dad because I'd be in so much trouble. So I'm going to take the drugs I'm being offered, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's all I've always remembered that, I want to build. And it's interesting when you're parenting teens because you kind of have to be like their guide. Like you can't be like a parent like when they're 6. It's a very different relationship. And so it's been beautiful to witness actually because my son's transformation on this particular product has been really beautiful to witness. So he's an amazing artist. And, he animates all these beautiful things. And, I share a lot of his artwork online. And I've just watched him really blossom. And it's so beautiful to witness when you see, because he was very withdrawn. He was very, not depressed, but, struggling a year ago. And in my postgrad, I learned all about the neurobiology of the teenage brain. Oh, my God. Like our teens are struggling so much. They are an anxious generation.
Yeah.
And mental health, it's just really frightening. And of course, they then become adults. Mental health statistics, like me and my husband have just designed a T-shirt to create awareness for men's mental health. Because men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women because they don't talk about their feelings. And so for this race my husband's doing, we've actually designed these. So I'd love to share that link with you. Because it's like, has a lighthouse and a ship and it's like reach out, you're not alone, and there's like hearts around, sailboat, and it's like your mental health matters. And we're just really trying to create that awareness because in my corporate work, I do a lot of speaking on mental health, and men's mental health is a big one that I talk about. And, again, neurodiversity and mental health, it's like they both have such a stigma. Stops people reaching out or having a conversation, and so people struggle in silence, and that's really detrimental obviously because they feel like they don't have anywhere to go. Interestingly, when you look at some of the traits of being neurodivergent, making radical change is one of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And we're so lucky that you're here doing it. That is a very scary statistic.
Yeah, it is. If you dive into research, it's frightening. It's frightening, the statistics on mental health, and it's not improving, you know, despite all the intervention. It's not, like, rates are rising. So you know, I could go on about this for hours, but the health system in Australia is 100% broken. And I realized that doing my postgrad and had a bit of a midlife crisis. And then this company arrived at the time when I was like, oh my God, people need to take back their own mental health, right? They need solutions. And so that's why this product's been, like, it's gone viral and sold out in Australia, and it's been really successful here, because people need, you know, if you go to the doctor and get 10 sessions on Medicare, you've got to wait months to see someone, right? SSRIs, which are antidepressants, don't even work 30-40% of the time. Like, it's a really long road. And if you've got a lot of anxiety, you want to feel better straight away. You don't want to wait 6 months.
Well, because 6 months of anxiety is like a lifetime, right? Time has a different meaning.
Yeah. So it's look, there's a lot of great products. There's a lot of, you know, great interventions. Like, I don't drink coffee, I don't drink alcohol, I go to bed at 9:30, right? Like, I've had to really change my life. Like, no more wine on the couch, and I don't miss it at all anymore. I did
a glass of wine with math.
No, we actually sit there with our protein ice cream.
Oh, I love it. What a healthy alternative.
It's good for you.
Oh, fantastic. Oh my gosh. Wow, this has been like such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much. Is there any last words of wisdom that you want to give out Empresses out there?
Look, you know, I love the concept of Empress. I actually love the Netflix, you know, the Netflix show Empress. If you've seen it, it's amazing. If you haven't seen it,
it's on my to watch.
It's amazing. But I think we are our own Empress, right? At the end of the day, you know, our queendom, or, you know, whatever you want to call that, you know, we have to create that environment for our family, and that we are we are the advocates, right? We will fight for our children. We are here to make the world a better place, right? You know, I lie awake at night and worry about the future for my kids, and that's why I'm so passionate about changing it. And so I think there's a lot of positivity that comes out of these conversations, and also this awareness. And so I think, you know, if one person benefits from this conversation, then my mission on this world is to keep families connected, because of my divorce and my whole journey and my mental health struggles and all the things. And yeah, it's like, I am all about changing one sort of neurodiverse family at a time, you know, just really small changes that have really big changes. So yeah, thank you for interviewing me and, you know, inviting me to come on. And I love the concept and the vibe. And yeah, you know, self-care saves as well. You know, the more we can, and self-care, just to clarify, just as a final note, it's not massages and, you know, yoga. I mean, I love all of that.
Love that one.
Love that. But what self-care really is creating a life you don't want to escape from. And I wanted to escape for years, because my house was not a sanctuary with 3 neurodivergent kids. And so I've worked really hard to create a beautiful, loving environment. We still have tears and tantrums, but we are able to regulate and support each other a lot more now. So it's been a huge journey. So I really empathize with anyone who's at the beginning of that journey. But it's been 16 years for me. You know, it's a long journey. So yeah, I empathize, and you know, please reach out if you need support. You're not alone.
Beautiful. We are going to put all of your contact details in all the notes. So if you do need someone, please reach out to Leonie. It's such a beautiful way to know that you're not alone out there in the world. Never. So remember that. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.